Bonjour à tous.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Solutrans Expo. We're here together for an hour and 15 minutes for this conference called Retrofit BIOCNG. It's concrete. Now, it is concrete, of course. And this is what you're going to learn during this conference. This is a project that will be shown to you, and not just an initiative, really something that's up and rolling and really well finished. So for CNG retrofit. So our friends, first of all, welcome. Start from the left towards the right. Anne-Sophie Bons from the Rhône-Alpes ADEME. She's an environmental engineer and in charge of mobility. So ADEME has to do with the energy transition and mobility, of course, this ecological transition. Next to you, Rémi Berger from CARA. You are director of the Innovating Axis. Now, CARA is a competitive cluster and an innovative cluster for the Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes region. Welcome to you. Daniel Touzé. You're in charge of business development at CRMT. This is a specialized engineering agency for retrofit, especially CNG. Next to you, Gladys Montayol, GRDF. You're a business engineer. Boy, we've got plenty of business engineers here in this conference. So you help produce biomethane, and you are really a supporter at GRDF of this conference this morning, and also a supporter of this project and conference, TRE, Jean-Christophe Gauthier, OTRE, Jean-Christophe Gauthier, General Delegate for this region, light vehicles, and chief profits, I think he said. So this is Heritage Family Hauliers Companies. Now, that's for our speakers, just to give you a brief overview of what our topic will be. And before giving the floor to Jean-Christophe Gautron and our other friends, of course, this environment is a transport environment. It's under constraints to an energy and ecological transition, which is very, very quick. With this legislative package, Fit for 55, which it's not necessarily a hit tune, but we all know this tune. For a 50% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, CO2 especially, with the dates applied to it. Now, this is under constraint of the transportation ecosystem, meaning we're going to have to move fast, especially industrial vehicles. First and foremost, we've got this resilience law as well that accelerating the low emission zone, these low emissions zones, LEZ. You are under constraint for these in the metropolitan area of Lyon. We've got 11 of these LEZs in France, Lyon Metropole and Grenoble and the Alps metropolitan area are among the foremost, and 25 of these have been planned for between now and the end of 2024. So given the number of local population, Chamonix Valley, Pays du Mont Blanc, and Auvergne Metropole as well. So in your territories, you've got 4 LEZ that you need to create between now and the end of 2024. Just to remember, an important figure, we'll show you a slide. In France, right now, I want us to talk about the circulating fleet. So please. So what's important to understand is that we don't just have this energy transit, big replacement, we call it, of vehicles by new electrical or hydrogen or whatever vehicle, or CNG, but we have a circulating fleet as well. We have the numbers on the screen there. The interpreter cannot see them. You can see them. You've got the rigids, you've got the trailers, you've got special vehicles, 700,000, 600,000 of which are light vehicles. That replacing all of this fleet, this circulating fleet is going to take dozens and dozens of years, not 5 years, not 3 years, and in 3 years. Of course, it's obvious that in these LEZs, The hauliers will not have been able to replace all of their vehicles by hydrogen vehicles because the hydrogen vehicles aren't even ready for this, and the electrical vehicles neither because they don't fit all of the conditions of use. So we need a solution or various solutions, a whole bunch of solutions that are adapted to the circulating fleet on the one hand, and to these low emission zones on the other hand. This is the aim of this conference, to show you and to prove to you that the CNG, bio-CNG retrofit is a great solution for right now, especially for this rolling fleet. And often we don't talk about the rolling fleet. We talk about electric retrofitting, and there's a decree on this, a government decree, but there's nothing really that's been done for this particular bio-CNG retrofit. So we've got something concrete to say on this subject. I won't be any longer than that. Now you have the floor, Jean-Christophe Gautron, a few words of introduction for this conference. Yes. For OTR, you said this, at the basis of everything, our aim is this LEZs, these low emission zones. And in my managerial position for this region, the LEZ for the Lyon metropolitan area means that we have to confront reality as hauliers. Now, this means we have to adapt very quickly to these LEZs and to the conditions that it involves. All hauliers, all transit operators are not concerned, but a number of groups are having to deal with this LEZ. Transport companies, especially public transit, and also public works, other hauliers from the moving sphere, some heavy-duty transport, such as wood and logging, and then also other heavy hauliers that have directed cooled systems to deliver to groceries. And also a number of specialized vehicles are involved with special adaptations to be done once again with directed cooled. So now all of these transit and hauling solutions companies are companies that have something in common. They are low mileage companies. It's not a question of long haul and lots of kilometers one after the other, not like a classical transit operator, but their vehicles have long lives now. They are amortized usually over 4 to 6 years. For these types of categories I've mentioned, this amortization or depreciation is over 10 to 15 years. So in November 2021, a number of vehicles of Euro 5 categories or assimilated are only through half of their lifespan of the entire fleet and must continue to work and adapt to the LEZ now. So we do need to deliberate on this. How can we ensure that we are compliant? Or either sell vehicles which are hard to sell because they are older, or just leave it all in the fleet and invest in new vehicles with the issues that we know are inherent, delays, lead times that are very slow, for example, a lot of slow lead times for deliveries of these new vehicles, or a prohibitive cost as well to acquire these vehicles, or some of these public transportation solutions, a new offer that involves gas and doesn't CNG that doesn't even exist yet. So I mentioned this to the CMRT and the GRDF, and I said, what about these vehicles? And they said, just leave these vehicles as they are, and let's just adapt them, retrofit the engine, find a solution that is going to make these vehicles compliant. Yeah, your members say some of them are stuck. They have no solution. They're stuck. They're stuck already by some of our members because they're having to deal with paradoxical injunctions. Once again, back to the category of haulage for public works. We're in the metropolitan area of Lyon, and an urban construction site started about 10 years ago, and there's still a number of years of a job site continuing on in the center of Lyon. Now, we ask these public works companies and also public works hauliers to adapt to urban constraints, but we forbid them from going into the LEZ because their vehicles are no longer compliant to the standards. Therefore, there's a need for deliberation and a technical solution that's a quick one. Over the course of 18 upcoming months to 3 years, so that these companies will be able to find room to turn around and to continue to work and to do their jobs while avoiding problems of non-compliance. So you say your aim, OTRE is between now and 3 years to have an industrialized solution that's been ramped up. Yeah, something that's going to be industrial. The LEZs, especially in Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes, are active already. And there's a need, and there's a necessity, per se, to be compliant with law and rules. Thanks for this introduction. Now, I'd like us to move gently forward here to be able to understand this reasoning or rationale for this, behind this project and the context as well. With you, Anne-Sophie Dance, ADEME Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes. Let's talk about retrofit and the advantages you see to it as an agency for ecological transition. So environmental transition. So this agency for the environment, we work on renewable energy, circular economy, and sustainable territories. When we think about retrofit, really checks off a lot of these needs and allows us to fit to these themes. Now, just let me remind you of a quick principle here that I like to repeat. We talk a lot about technology when we talk about transportation. That's all fine and good. We move forward. But there are a number of levers that need to be applied so as to advance with the subject and move towards the energy transition, especially energy efficacy. Before we change technologies, there are other things that can be done, and they're very accessible to hauliers, and they need to be put forward. One quick example, some of you know this in the room here, the CO2 charter, the CO2 aim or goal for committed hauliers to be able to work on decreasing fuel consumption, especially greenhouse gases. That was one thing, just a reminder. Then, of course, after that as well, retrofit has become an option that is part of a possible energy mix. The ADME for a long time has been promoting this idea of energy mix in transition and in green energies. And yes, this has become an option that's relatively recent for this rationale, reasoned out technology. And this is part of this energy mix and panel of solutions that it's true sometimes for public or private players they have a hard time finding their way. We've got to be honest about this, but nonetheless, this new retrofit technology allows us to ensure the extended lifespan of this rolling stock. And this is something quite new compared to other pre-existing solutions, and also with CNG, it fights for a renewable source of ecological transition. So there are plenty of questions now being raised. And here's a slide that shows you on the left the advantages of a CNG retrofits. We'll talk about this later on, but anyway, I wanted to give the floor to Gladys Montagnol, who's a business development engineer at GRDF, and the ADEME in Rhône-Alpes has carried out a study linked to what we call an ACV, and maybe you're going to have to explain this. So a BioCNG, a retrofit study. Mic is working. Yes, I didn't talk about it, but that's true. Some of you have seen this study for electrical retrofit that was done by the ADEME on environmental and economic advantages. Now, the idea is a national idea. It's a national study. The idea is to be able to objectivize data that we believe is interesting from an environmental point of view, but they're part of this electric retrofit study. So to objectify this, we decided, therefore, for 2022 that the results will be available in April 2022 to do the same thing, same type of study for ACV of the BioCNG retrofit. So a life cycle analysis, LCA. So ACV is LCA. So Gladys Montagnol, you support this project, you back it, especially the CNG, bio-CNG sphere, because it's a question of succeeding with this project. Yes. Quick specification. We're not a producer, we're a distributor of gas, the main operator in France. For our public service assignments, we accompany development of this particular solution for sustainable mobility, bio-CNG, because these vehicles are crit air. One, they are low emissions, and they can go into the LEZs, and then a bio-CNG vehicle can move forward with this renewable gas solution, and that's what we're interested in. So we connect up to charging stations for CNG, and we also connect up the entire industry. So what we're measuring today is this solution is really a mature one and an accessible one. I can't go too much into detail, but there's a real economic model involved. There's a supply that is provided by the constructors and the builders, especially for heavy-duty vehicles, but also for some equipment. We could even speed this process up more, because that's the big challenge, to make sure that we get this energy transition here and now. So retrofit is a great lever that we have identified to accelerate this further. We know that in the future we will continue to do our distribution in profession, as long as what we're distributing is renewable. So gas can be produced from waste today, for example. So we've become aware that GRDF, the sense of the economy of tomorrow, is a circular economy, recycling, and that is why we aid and assist the industry and the various federations, professional federations, in projects like the one we're talking about here today, because we know that this is the future. This is a question of industry or sphere. Jean-Christophe Gauthier. Yes, to go back to what was said by Anne-Sophie and Gladys, the entire interest that we can have as hauliers or carriers for this economic model is this idea of circular economy. Our companies are SMEs, TPEs, and they are part of the territorial framework of the local environment, local economies. And so when you deliberate on bio-CNG, it really involves the business volume and the turnover volume that the circular economy can convey. Now, when there is bio-CNG, as was just reminded, there is waste, and you can collect this waste now, collecting it via waste operators, but above and beyond that as well, there are a number of categories which are special hauliers with dump truck systems, and here they can move on with what they're continuing to collect. They're distribute and collect the waste at the same time as part of a circular economy. Another thing to think about on the midterm, we're at SOLUTRANS here, and I mentioned this with some of the manufacturers yesterday, manufacturers of tanks. Now, we as a professional branch, we're going to have to help out with some of these tank fleets for hydrocarbons. This is no longer It's no longer going to be able to be diesel, and we don't know what to do. What about this diesel solution right away? But our tankers are going to have to be assistant, and the methane that's produced when it's close to a GRDF grid. We just plug in the methane methanizer to the network, and sometimes overall you have to transport it, and sometimes you're out in the country and you're next to nothing, and so this methane gas needs to be converted into biomethane that can be used for CNG. So this is what we need to deal with to be able to anticipate this type of option and to reconvert this fleet. So this gives us a very exemplary image of the future of this professional sphere. Now, Rémi Berger, CARA. CARA is a competitive cluster, and yes, a different pool and a cluster in Rhône-Alpes. So you are there to encourage technological innovation. Now, you've worked a lot on the emergence of this project, and there's a lot of sneak preview here, but there's plenty of things ongoing that are going to be announced soon. Thank you very much for giving us the floor on this subject. It's true that the project that we're going to present later on is actually the outcome of a whole series of other projects where there are stakeholders who have played a big role and allowed us to emerge towards a technological solution that's immediate for an immediate problem and for which we have no other solutions right now. So that's the entire interest of CARA's ecosystem in our competitive cluster, to be able to recover these skill sets and to recover problems and to put them together, bring them together around the table and say, what can we do today with all of the skills we have on hand? What can we do for this problem of tomorrow? Tomorrow, it's tomorrow is there the very next day. So these are big issues, but there could be simple solutions that will meet needs for hauliers and also other transport operators, and for governments as well, administrations. So Daniel Touzet, you are in you're a business development engineer for CRMT. So within your entity, your company, and this is where it becomes fascinating right away, this project of school buses, it's a school bus system using as fuel BIOCNG, and this is what you put forward at CRMT. Your company was bought 20 years ago by a gentleman. You're going to tell us a little bit about this man, and he already had an idea for retrofitting. Yeah, I can tell you that. Yeah, get your mic closer to your chin, he asked her. It's a very interesting story. We're going to start with this retrofit project because you're right. It's CRMT, which was an engineering company or an engineering office to validate this solution and to suggest this solution. But also, I wanted to remind you that it's a collaborative project, because really, the Berthollet company started working with CRMT with a specific need to find a greening solution for part of their fleet that is composed of Euro 5 vehicles that use diesel. Very good mechanical condition, but they're kind of out of use and they're over their expiry date because they're not biodiesel. And so there was a need. So we came together, we thought about this, we identified hypothetical solutions. We got closer right away to the OEMs and the builders. So there's the bus company that's been on board since the beginning. We also had EVICO bus, and Voit as well has helped us with the technical things, financing, thanks again to Anne-Sophie Bons here, financial backing from the ADEME, but also Total Energies, private funding as well. So we've got the bus. The bus is driven here today, has been driven here today, and you can see it's a huge project, huge scale project. We're talking about a vehicle retrofit because we didn't convert the engine. We removed the existing motorization to put a gas equivalent in. That's the retrofit side, because, as you said, at CRMT, we've got 20 years experience on retrofitting. And so also we can proceed by converting the diesel motorization to get it running under compressed gas or different types of natural gas. So we can handle it from A to Z. We designed this on the spot. We had a test bench to test it out, and then we validate it, and we go as far as a certification homologation. So why did you choose a vehicle a retrofit rather than the engine capacity or motorization? For a number of reasons, especially the most obvious reason is because the engine already exists in gas equivalent, and it was much simpler for us. It made so much more sense from a CMRT point of view. To conclude, what's interesting in this project, and I'd like to go back to what Duval said, is that to the opposite of what we have experienced in the past when we did developments, today we've come to a point in time where we are absorbing a great shift, a great gap between what is expected of us as transport companies with our vehicles and then the state-of-the-art of technology. So that's where retrofit can provide a great solution. Not always possible, but nonetheless, in this is Ecol'car. So this project that is here at present at Solutrans, what are you aware it is at the end? It's Ecol'car, school car, or Ecol'car, that's the name of it. So this is a retrofit of Berthollet. Now, before we show a picture of this, we're not going to do it. We'll talk about case of use or uses. Jean-Christophe, what you were saying as an introduction, what we repeat in the background is that we must start from particular cases of use. And you at CRMT, you really thought about the CRIT-AIR, CRIT-AIR. If a potential haulier comes to see you and they say, I have a need, do you study? You don't say just yes or no, we'll do business together. It would be too easy. No, that's exactly it. We just look at it in depth. And then we're going to show you a slide that will allow you to summarize what we call cases of use.
So here's the slide. So you're going to have to sum this up for us. So we decided to show you this to educate a little bit about what we do and also to have a discussion. And so what you say is very important because it's a start point for any retrofit decision. What's the use case? What's the application? So we have a variety of criteria, technical criteria, but you also have to take into account the infrastructure. That's why GRDF is here on the table as an infrastructure operator. And another important point is the economic side of things. So in terms of criteria, we have the price of the new vehicle, the higher the value of the vehicle, the price of the vehicle, the more worth it is to have a retrofit project and to green light the project. What you need to do is analyze the criteria with the customer. You can't say that just because a vehicle is new that it's eligible for retrofitting. If it has a lot of mileage and it has to have a long range, it doesn't really make sense. But also from a technical point of view, we know that natural gas takes up more space than a diesel tank. You need 4 times more volume to store the right amount of gas in the vehicle. That brings us to the question of the available space within the vehicle, which also has an effect on the range of the vehicle. If you have a vehicle that needs less range, you can have a smaller tank. So the natural gas, the NGV bus was a very good application for this conversion. I'll tell you why. Well, first of all, it's because we are talking about the bus. And the buses tend to have a value of more than 100,000 euros when they're new. And even if vehicles are not new, even if they are Euro 5 vehicles, they actually cover very little mileage every year. So the actual mechanical side of things, they are in very good condition. They are well maintained, and they are able to travel many more miles. And also they carry school children, so the actual holds of the buses are rarely filled, so that allows you to take up space, use the space for a tank. If you we're talking about a bus that takes people to the airport, it's not going to be as favorable. So these are the different criteria that led us to observe that this was a very favorable case for conversion to gas. So when you talk about amortization, the depreciation period must be long, and it must allow a vehicle which is in the middle of its life cycle to be favorable to conversion to gas. The bus goes around a loop, obviously, so that's easier for refueling. So you could say it's a captive fleet because the Berthollet system, the Berthollet company has a big refueling station for natural gas, and if you can refuel regularly along the loop the bus travels along each day, that's very advantageous. So we're going to see another slide now. On the left, you are going to describe what we see on the screen. So generally speaking, the solution today involves a visible side, which is what you can see on the screen. So we remove the diesel engine and everything that the diesel engine needs to operate, the fuel system, etc. And we inserted here a natural gas engine with all the different surrounding components you need for gas, for the use of gas. And we also installed a tank to store the gas, so gas canisters containing compressed gas, and also an airtight enclosure for the tank, because the bus was not initially designed for use of natural gas. The part you cannot see, but which is very important, is the whole software modification, the whole interfacing and interconnection of the systems, which is something we had to do to ensure that Euro 5 vehicle, which was formerly diesel, to communicate with its gas engine. So this is something that affects the gearbox, the engine management, all the different software and electronic systems that govern how the vehicle operates. So the solution has now been completed. It is now on the road. Is able to drive on the road, but first we have to, before it goes on the road, we need to carry out type approval, and that should be completed next year. Rémi Berger, if you had to sum up the advantages of this project, what would you say? Simplicity, pragmatism. We started out with a solution. We started out with a clear problem. Several technical options were considered, but the best solution became clear quite quickly. It's nothing revolutionary. This is the assembly of something that already exists. The software work is actually quite considerable, but it's not really a breakthrough innovation. It's something which is a pragmatic solution, which is a real-world solution, which is nothing too advanced. I would also like Aurélien Berthollet to come and join us on stage. I will give you a microphone. You are the company which is most closely involved here. So Transport Berthollet is a bus company that has around 200 vehicles. So the area you cover, so we are specialized in public transport of passengers. We work with Citram and the Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes region. We work in small local loops. We offer bus transport for schools on small mileages, and also regional passenger transport, which involves more mileage. And we decided to convert a type of vehicle which was representative of our fleet. So how many buses? I mean, school buses, about 150 to 160. That's accounts for most of what we do, most of our operations. Was it your idea to retrofit these vehicles? Well, credit where credit is due. It was the president of the Berthollet Group who was thinking deeply about the idea before we pulled the trigger. He was wondering whether you should buy electric vehicles and have 40 years worth of costs to catch up on. So what really underpins what our company does is care for the environment. We are 14001 certified, ISO 14001 certified. This is something we think about a lot, the environmental side of things. When you think it's innovative and you're looking for pragmatic solutions, that's to something. This was something we'd already thought about with Euro 4 vehicles, and our president had spoken to CRMT to ask whether we could take Euro 4 vehicles to Euro 5 standard, because in the specifications we provided when a call for tenders was put out, each time the public authorities encouraged us to renew and to update vehicles which could continue to be used if they were up to standard. But with Euro 4 to Euro 5, this was not something that we could do. But we thought about another approach based on Euro 5 vehicles. The Berthollet was approached once again, and we found out that this was something we could achieve. So the first school bus, which has been converted, is here today at SOLUTRANS, something you're very proud about. Yes, we're very pleased to see the concrete results of a project which was first discussed in summer 2020. So between two lockdowns, all this was achieved. This was a business a sector which has been strongly affected by the global public health situation. But it's made us think that we want to consume differently. A lot of discussions have been accelerated by the health crisis. Thank you very much for your words. We have 40 minutes left to talk more specifically about technology, and that's something I am sure you want to hear about it. But we're going to focus first on regulations, because we have to clarify the topic at hand. We're talking about retrofitting of BIOCNG. A retrofit decree was launched in France in 2020, which relates to electric vehicles, which does not cover the retrofitting of vehicles for gas consumption. So this electric retrofit regulation does not relate to what we're talking about here. What's the regulatory framework that covers this particular project? So yes, this is something we are not covered by. This framework does not cover anything we do. When we talk about electrical retrofitting, type approval can be very expensive. So that's something else. I would also like to remind you about another project we are involved in, a collaborative project. We're working with EVICO. This is a very important project, and it's very important that they are involved and that they give us their approval to make the modifications. They give us their approval for the work we do. They need to be involved upstream. As regards the regulatory framework for retrofitting, well, our vehicles and what we do, and the vehicles we produce, they comply with the highway code. They comply with regulation R110, which covers all natural gas vehicles. But today it's important to say that there is no law or any decrees that cover this kind of activity, this kind of operation. But what we do is work upstream with manufacturers, but also with certification organizations, which support us throughout the process, including this project, the first project, which is an insulated prototype, which is going to lead to type approval for the prototype. This involves working upstream with the right people, the right certification bodies, to ensure that we can type approve the solutions. But there is no official regulatory text on this. You are accustomed to insulated reception. So that means you have to have the whole project type approved and the technology and the techniques used type approved as imposed by the government rules and laws. So there are many tests that have to be carried out on the vehicles, also demonstrations, because sometimes for retrofits you don't need to do everything. You need to be able to show, first of all, the paperwork that proves that you haven't changed certain aspects of the vehicle, so that is checked as well. This is checked by the authorities. That's why it's going to take until next year to be able to actually roll out the project. That's why we're currently only dealing with a small number of vehicles, but later on we will be able to move on to larger volumes. So once your initial approval is received, the initial approval for a smaller number of vehicles will be sufficient for you to put these vehicles, a small number of vehicles, on the road.
Possibilité qui est offerte, qui est finalement plus simple en quelque sorte.
It's an interesting question, and that's the question of how the industry is going to progress and evolve. So we've been doing this for 20 years and we do it well, but I think if there was a regulatory framework in place, it could make things easier. So the RTI, which is something that all manufacturers have to use to type approve new uses. So if you have a refrigerated vehicle, for example, you have to carry out specific type of approval if you want to change its use, if you want to use it for different purposes. So that's the RTI. So this is a concrete, real-world, tangible case. It's not far-fetched to say that in less than 3 years you can start the industrial conversion of vehicles for other customers. So this is only the beginning of any kind of procedure that you want to go down. So this is something that allows you to lobby the government and the authorities, talk to them about the setup of a whole industrial sector for this kind of conversion. And it's clear to say that the COVID crisis has made vulnerable certain sectors, and this includes goods transport companies, removal companies, industrial companies. Our politicians have set up an approach concept that will allow the economy to be reinvigorated, and we need to take advantage of their measures to really initiate a process. And as you have said, first of all, you need use cases like this one. These use cases are existing use cases. They are pragmatic, real-world cases. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. This is not something we're building from the ground up. The vehicles are there. The NGV technology is there. It's all in place. And what's needed is a societal shift to ensure that these solutions are included in the solutions of the future. So you're talking about, let's talk about the ecosystem now. As Daniela was saying, and Jean-Christophe, this is something you really place the emphasis on. EVICO were difficult to convince initially, and certain manufacturers are beginning to listen up a bit more. It's hard to get them to listen sometimes, but from a marketing and sales perspective, these companies have new vehicles to sell, and what they're telling you is perhaps that you're cutting into their margins and their business. Well, there has been public debate led by the government about the conversion of industrial vehicles, and these manufacturers have to face up to reality. They also have used vehicles in their fleets, and what should they do with these used vehicles? I think that retrofitting provides them with a solution which doesn't threaten their sales of new vehicles. When the gas and electric are more mature, they will become the dominant segment. But in the meantime, manufacturers still have certain vehicles that they need to sell, which are older technologies. So the emphasis must be placed on the conversion of used vehicles. For example, EVICO, they provided you with parts, they provided you with information about the technologies that can be used for their vehicles. I wouldn't be able to speak on their behalf, but I'm going to talk about what I know. I would invite you to come to a press conference at 3:30, and EVICO will be there. This will take place at our stand. What you need to understand, and what we can all say, is that this retrofit segment, it represents a significant change and a significant development. It's hard for a manufacturer to change their internal processes. Especially in the time frames that we want to move forward in. Once the project is completed, I will let EVICO talk about this project themselves at the press conference. But EVICO facilitated access to the information we needed to develop the solution, and they will also take on a role as a supplier. And they will also be supplying engines, so there will be EVICO engines and components, but initially they are a technical sponsor. At CRMT, you're going to be a new kind of conversion company, a company specializing in retrofitting NGV. So as we've seen for the last 20 years, it's not a simple process, especially when you're converting an engine. This is a very different process compared to a petrol engine, because a petrol engine runs on very similar components to gas vehicle, but diesel is very different. It's a quite niche It's a quite niche activity, but we hope we can add our expertise to the segment to help it develop in the future. So there are retrofitting projects seen light of day every day. For example, Technocar. What needs to be highlighted is that it provides business to manufacturers. Of course, I'm not going to be able to tell you how many retrofit projects we have been called upon to get involved in over the last year. But many of these developments are happening very fast because manufacturers are providing information about their vehicle architectures and technical drawings, and that allows us to speed up the transformation and speed up the conversion process. But when a manufacturer requests something, you need to be able to highlight to them what the advantage is for them. So the manufacturer is a supplier of equipment. We're talking about EcoBus, which is part of the EVICO group. This whole approach, allows them to grow their business. It provides them with more sales, and it's not going to destroy what they already do, or it's not going to impinge on their existing business. So when you're talking about electric retrofitting, EVICO are developing electric vehicles themselves. Why would they help a competitor develop an offering that they want to develop internally? So the whole question is how you establish a synergy. How do you attract the manufacturer? How do you get him interested in the topic? And how do you show them the value that there is for them in working in this way? So I'm not talking about NGV retrofitting here, but I'm talking about a strategy by Renault. And Renault is going to open a refactory in Douai, where they're going to retrofit electric motors to commercial vehicles. And why not take this approach with Circulating and others? So alone it is hard to move forward, but together this kind of project is much more realistic. So what we have seen is that there are operators, there are institutions, there are conversion companies, and there are manufacturers. There are all kinds of stakeholders of which the sector is comprised. And without all the stakeholders involved, it's hard to move forward. But there are other stakeholders, i.e. the governments, local authorities. The ZFEs, the low emission zones, are something which places certain pressure on the stakeholders. These are political choices which have a significant impact on all economic stakeholders within a region. So that's something which places pressure. It's something that forces the hand of these stakeholders. And the introduction of retrofitting, of BioNGV, these are assets and strengths when you want to answer a call for tenders which imposes this kind of technology. First of all, we're going to talk about gas now. Gladys, we haven't heard you speak. The final point, which is an essential one, is the refueling, refilling of gas tanks with BioNGV. We don't all know how much biomethane is produced and distributed today. How do you produce a network of biomethane refueling stations? So what the approach we're taking assumes that there's going to be a greater and more widespread network of refueling stations. When you recycle a vehicle, when you convert a vehicle, it's going to last a certain amount of time. It can be a significant amount of time. So that means having to build capacity for the future. So what the industry is going to ask is, will there be sufficient bio-NGV tomorrow to enable vehicles to operate? So it's a network, it's an industry which is growing. We weren't talking about biomethane even 10 years ago. So this is an industry which is developing quickly. The number of projects for the injection of biomethane over the last 3 years is multiplied by 5. And what we're doing in terms of pipes, we're multiplying the production and the supply of energy of this gas, this renewable energy by 10. It's a tenfold increase. By 2023, 2024, we should reach the objective set for 2028. And today, all mobility, even if it's not retrofitted, can be done with biomethane. There are certain amounts of farmland which can be used to produce the gas.
So that's the interest of this fuel, that's biomethane. We're not at all in production of biomass. We're not competing with crops that are dedicated to food. So that's why in this European directive, RED2, the biofuel is considered to be renewable and not at all with no limits whatsoever in terms of volume. So a methanizer, a methanizing system, where do you implant it? So where do you put it? You say 300 and something sites of 354 different points of injection for biomethane. So it could be in cities because there's bio waste, and there's also city waste treatment remains as well. So also, this is part rural because France is an agricultural land as well, because we serve 80% of the population. So the gas network is a grid is the 200,000 kilometers of network in France. So we're adapting the network so that we can go out and fish up some of these methane units, even several kilometers away. So we've got these framework ideas or these lines forward or master plans that allow us to have a perspective. So we've got our own at GRDF, but other organizations that are more legitimate for energy mix approach, the ADME and others, Megawatt as well, RTE as well, an electric company that is also working on the methane energy plans. So this is compatible with 100% with the renewable gas between now and the horizon 2050. So to transport this CNG or GNV, so NGV. NVG. So we know we're going to be reducing through the industry, even using this mobility use. We've got this trajectory that is realistic with 100% of gas that is of local renewable origin. Yes, we've also got a slide on the public stations that exist as well. 275 points of filling stations, filling areas between now and the end of the year. So we're at the end of the year. We're online concerning our aim. So a lot of points around, dots around run out because the LEZs are helping out, helping accelerate these alternative cities. So is this going to work concretely? I mean, we're going to have to install a filling station at the Berthollet company. They've already got one. They already have a filling unit. Here are the public stations. There are a lot of them because they're important, because they allow people to get filled up. They don't have to go back to the station every night. So these public stations are very important. What we need is a whole framework, a meshing of them. And so this is going to be completed by private stations so that we can optimize performance in terms of logistics. And also, we see today that for our industry, there are new solutions that are arising for small private gas stations that are customized to 1, 2, 3 vehicles. So it's quite dynamic in terms of model, refill model. So we can really trust in the fact that, yes, this is going to be covered by the network. So the point of view of the OTR, it's very simple. This is an existing model. If we look at the previous generation of fuels, the fact of having a whole meshwork of gas stations or diesel stations throughout France has never kept professionals for having their own filling units or stations in their own companies so that they can fill up their vehicles before the vehicles leave the company. And then add diesel fuel along the course of the travel should it be needed on a long haul. So this gas grid can also follow the same example. And there's no necessary opposition between public-private. Now, just to what Gladys said, we're talking about the industrial world, but the industrial world really has an interest in moving towards this biomethanization. I'll give you a concrete example. I went to visit a few months ago a filling station for methane in the Lyonnais Hills, Mont du Lyonnais. And one of the resources by the methane supplier was to work for the food producers. Now, there was a well-known producer from the milk industry, had 15 cubic meters, if I remember rightly, of concentrated milk that had bacteria in it. So we talked it over with the owner of this methane station, and the industrialists looked at the cost of what it might have cost them before to empty out the tank, to transform or reprocess this milk. But since there's now methanization, all they did was transfer this 15 cubic meters of spoiled milk, concentrated milk, and made gas out of it, methane. So from an economic point of view, there's less bacteria. It's really interesting. Yes, Anne-Sophie. Yes. This public station network has arisen thanks to the backing of local governments, administrations, and more specifically in the Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes area where I work. Yes, we backed a whole measure that was backed by the regional government and the ADEME. So there's this rollout program called GN Voluntary NG, and there should be a volontaire. It's called GN Volontaire. So you've got this lovely poster on your right as well that shows you. This summarizes what's been done since 2017, since this operation began. GN Volontaire. So there's the major milestones are written on these screens. It's a joint program, and you can do a lot with partnerships, so it's good to work conjointly between GRDF, the region, and the ADEME, regional government, and the ADEME as financiers and assistants. Now, what they're doing with this program is the local administrators and the hauliers in the field. So since 2017, we've been trying to encourage this filling station network because there should be no competition in this field. So if you can't fill your vehicle, then you're not going to have any solution, whether it be retrofit or any other alternative energy solution. We, since 2017, have wanted to increase the number of truck and lorry stations in the Rhône-Alpes area because they would add to the networks of private stations that hauliers use as well that have enough volume to be able to have a private system. But these public stations as well, it reassures people about filling possibilities, and it gives them good structure. And since 2017, when we began this, from almost none or very few public stations, now we've got more than a dozen public stations throughout the Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes area, one per département. These are assisted stations, but the idea is to trigger the pump here and to prime the pump. And we've got about 30 public stations that exist throughout the territory, but the aim was to really spread this out through the territory and include the major cities or towns. You see them on the right there. And then to create a mesh structure with GN Volontaire, second edition, moving this to more peri-urban or outside of urban areas, including the Mont de Lyonnais that Christophe was talking about. So this really makes sense. So we've looped the loop here. We've talked about all of the major potential trigger points on this subject, and you've seen that all of these points have found their solutions. Now, from a technical point of view and a needs point of view, and if we always start with the need for these projects that are very important, well, in terms of distribution and refilling, and especially in terms of the future, because it's really important to industrialize this solution. So we've got 7 to 8 months remaining here together. So I suggest that if you do have questions, ask your questions. I'll move over with the mic so you can speak up. So while you're thinking for a minute or two about your questions, because sometimes we say, are there questions? And then no, there are no questions because you don't have enough time. But otherwise, you have to think quickly. So please introduce yourself quickly and tell us. Laurent Ducomage, GRDF in Toulouse. Retrofit may have a number of facets in it. In your retrofit, you replace the engine of diesel by gas, by compressed gas. Did you conserve a possibility for a diesel feed as well? So what do you do with this remaining organs of the diesel system? Daniel Touzet. Yes. What we did in the gas tank, we removed it, and we also worked on converting the heating because it was diesel heat as well. It was not that easy because we wanted to make it 100% CNG. So this bus is pushed by natural gas, but we found a lot of empty spots. There are a lot of empty hollow spots or empty spots now in the bus. We took the AdBlue reservoir or tank, and we put a filling tank there. So we find ourselves with these hollow spots in the bus because there are fewer components, and also the catalytic system, the catalytic system, there's a change as well. We take the components, and then we wonder about recycling and reusing these components, including the engine, because we're not going to be able to do anything directly with it. But we do have partners who are, and other people are interested in this possibility for recycling, reselling, reconditioning these things. It's another profession, it's not our own. But we also take care of these things of what do we do with these components? Do we recycle? Do we upcycle? Do we sell? This is part of the creativity of this ecosystem, to ask oneself questions about what to do, how one can reuse all of these components that have been taken out of the inside of the vehicle. These are questions for electrical vehicles and no other comparisons. So we are restoring sense to this idea of sustainable commercialization. So a number of lifespans for one component, let's say. Other questions, perhaps? 2 questions. I'll be there in a sec. Louis Fresh, I'm independent. I'm an advisory engineer in the environment and mobility. Thank you very much for this discussion. Very good. Can we talk about the French scale production of a fuel that is biomethane? That's the first question. The second question about having to do with bio-CNG and the Euro 7 upcoming norm. So what are you thinking about the Euro 7? Because they say that the new Euro 7 framework might kill off gas. So, Gladys, today the production of biomethane, 300 projects that we've backed is 5 terawatt hours. So this is very low in terms of gas consumed in France, used in France. But this mobility use is ramping this up, this production. Now, today we know that there are about 20% of gas mobility that is done with biomethane. So really, this is what it's used the most for. Daniela, Euro 7 is the next vehicles to come out. Yeah, okay. So let me remind you that the Euro 7 standard has not yet been published. And without being published, it's been put off for quite a while, so we're expecting it. I hope it by the end of the year, but I don't think so. Now, I do not believe that this will kill off, as you say, gas compared to diesel or vice versa, but most likely the question one might raise as a builder is, do I have a future in developing new engine capacities and motorizations that correspond to this standard? Because maybe in a few years I won't be able to sell these things anymore. This is what I see myself in terms of this question. But for the competition side, from one to the other, I'm not so sure of this because there's a whole lot of pollutants that are not regulated today, but they will be put under constraint in Euro 7. And we really have to look at what's going on in one engine compared to another engine or one motor to another. So I'm going to stop here to compare what's comparable. Well, no matter what, until now, gas vehicles, no matter what their generation, there's a part of catalysis, but all of this post-combustion side of the gas is basically inexistent. That's why it takes up less room. And yes, I think we'll move into gas with the Euro 7, probably with a particle filter, but it's combustion that is clean at the very basis, but perhaps we're going to be able to improve it a little bit. Nonetheless, there's a whole R&D topic here that we're still moving forward on. Might I add a last point, if this is a subject of interest to you? Yes, it is very important, but I didn't want to talk about it because it's not necessarily the aim of this conference. Our third activity has to do with measuring pollutants with the PENS technology. And so we've got good certification for this, and we've got the most recent measurement equipment with our partner. So we can look for very, very fine particular matter and all of the regulatory things, because it's a very long list, but nonetheless, these are things that we master. If you have any questions, do contact us, and we can talk about it outside of this conference. Thank you very much for that last point of view. And last question. Thank you. Lorenzo Ferrand. I'm from a company in Paris. You're the LEZ of Paris. So we're talking about all the LEZs in France. Two questions. First, you talked about an equivalent engine. I'm sorry, I did not understand. If in the gas there's a flaw in the vehicle, you rework the software package. The Iris bus network is just going to be able to be compatible with this. A second question on vehicles where the builder doesn't have a gas equivalent or equivalent power. Mine has a gas system for urban buses, but not tourist buses. Was there a system of adaptation or some kind of fit? Yes, we took the solution to replace the engine, as you said, to remove the diesel and use gas, because that was a simple solution. So if there's no existing possibility, one might wonder about developing a variant. Technically, it is possible. Then we have to look with the builder or the OEM whether it's technically feasible or not, financially feasible or not. And then for the first question, I'm not sure that I understood your first question. Does the Iris bus, for example, network have the capacity to intervene on retrofitted engines that have been retrofitted by you? So basically, it's a question of maintenance. You're not talking about our ongoing project. It's actually the lifespan of this vehicle. Berthollet carrier they're going to have to be trained in this first level maintenance. Oh yeah, I get it now, thank you. So that others can intervene who are not OEMs. So after sales service and the guarantees is going to be managed by CRMT. Airbus is going to follow us for spare parts, but we'll follow the rest. If there's a problem, it's our responsibility for upkeep and maintenance. Maybe this will be the final word. What is your ambition at CRMT in this industrial ramp-up? For this project, we've got a first aim with the Berthollet company. Next year, we're going to convert their fleet, portion of their fleet that was dedicated to this project, to move it completely from diesel to CNG. We believe in this project. We believe in the interest that this project has used for this vehicle and other vehicles as well. There are plenty of people around here listening to the study. We've invested in enlarging our premises to have the right capacity to produce more than what we have today. Next year, we have 50 to 100 units, but starting in 2023, we're going to be talking about 150 to 200 units. So we can't do all of France, but we've already prepared for this enlargement. We really hope that this first project of school bus retrofits is going to really set up the foundations, and I think we've established this, but we do hope that the feedback on this project and the way we will have succeeded in the end to have involved everyone will allow us to launch this industry, because that's what we want. This is what we all expect here at Solufrance here. Thank you very much, my dear speakers. You can see this Ecol'car, the special school bus, C31 CRMT stand, and also there's a press conference by CMRT and EVICO at 3:30. Hall 1, C31. Thank you to our speakers.
Très bonne journée sur Solutrans.